All right, welcome to the Growth Mixtape Podcast. I'm your host, Bob Mathers, and this is another solo episode. So it's a bit different from most of my conversations with other people. These solo episodes are an opportunity for me to assemble different nuggets from things I've been talking to people about, conversations I've been having, and working through them in my mind in hopes that they'll provide some clarity for you as well. So I'll tell you that this episode I'm excited about. I'm also a little bit anxious and nervous about. It's probably my most ambitious solo episode ever. First, I'll tell you what I'm excited about. I wonder if you've ever had it where you're thinking about something. It's kind of all consuming. It's kind of the default that your brain sort of wanders into when you're not doing other kind of specific intentional work. It could be an idea that you've been kind of ruminating on for a while. I've had that for a while, but it seems to attract other ideas, other conversations that are related to it. And so this conversation, this episode is the culmination of an idea that I've had around this collective midlife crisis that so many of us are going through, especially at, I'm in my mid 50s. So maybe you're like me, maybe you're 40s or 50s, but I've also talked to people in their 20s about this. So I call it a midlife crisis for lack of a better term, although it can happen at any time in your life. And it's the combination of a bunch of different things. Specifically, this one is a unique combination of COVID, the disruption of AI, and the growing kind of economic uncertainty that is kind of culminated in this thing that I've called the corporate reckoning. And I've talked to a lot of organizations and people about it. So I'm going to introduce that idea as a way of giving language and a frame for what we are all going through and why this collective midlife crisis is different than the one that virtually every generation goes through. This feeling, this growing restlessness that there's got to be something more to this, to work, to life, etc. So I'm excited to share my ideas on that. The other thing that sort of got thrust into my orbit around this idea of this corporate reckoning and this collective midlife crisis is a new book by a guy named Jim Collins. Now, he's one of the biggest business authors probably of the last 15 years. He's written books that you might have heard of called Good to Great, Beyond Entrepreneurship, Built to Last. And his latest book is called What to Make of a Life. And it seems to be one of those books that feels like it was written exactly for me and exactly for all of the people that I'm talking to. And it seems to have given kind of a richness and understanding to what this corporate reckoning thing is all about, and most importantly, what to do about it. So it's a really interesting combination of those two ideas that I wanted to bring together in this episode. So that's what I'm excited about. What I'm anxious about is that these ideas have been rattling around in my head for weeks. I've delayed this episode probably 3 times. My producer, Amy, keeps saying, okay, ready for that solo episode. I'm like, nope, going to have to go with something else that we've got in the queue. It's not ready. It's not ready. It's not ready. And I just keep putting it off because my understanding keeps changing. And I'd like to think it's getting richer and more complex, but I feel like if I don't just start saying these things out loud and sharing these ideas, I'm never going to get this episode out. And I think a lot of us feel that way when we're trying to create something or we have an idea. It's like, no, it's not ready. It's not ready. It's not ready. It's like, yeah, it's ready enough. So this is ready enough. And I don't know how it's going to age. I expect that I will listen to this episode a month from now or maybe a year from now and cringe maybe at how naive I was or how much more evolved my thinking was. And I think that's okay. I think looking back at things that we've done in the past and being a bit cringy about it is a sign that we're growing. I'd hate to think that I could go back and listen to episode 1 of this podcast almost 3 years ago and say, oh yeah, that was the best podcast I ever did. How depressing would that be? I want to look back at those things and be like, ugh, wow, I've really come a long way. So the part that's anxious, makes me a little bit anxious and nervous, is that these ideas feel very important to me. They feel very weighty. I feel a responsibility to do them justice. I want to do a good job, but I know my thinking is kind of scattered. But I'm hoping that giving you the opportunity to listen to my kind of half-baked ramblings on these ideas might give you some space to inject your own experiences and ideas into this as you listen, to maybe come away with something that I haven't even thought of yet. So that's what I'm most excited about and a little anxious about. So let's talk about this collective midlife crisis that we all seem to be going through, whether you're 20, 30, 40, 50, maybe even 60. Now, I think it is true that sometimes I do have a bit of a skewed perspective on the world. Because of the nature of the work that I do, nobody reaches out to me when they're absolutely killing life. I talk to a lot of people that feel stuck in careers. They don't love their work like they used to. Maybe they've been in the job market for a long time. I don't talk to the people that are out there absolutely killing it. But I really am convinced that there are not that many people out there. And of course, if you go on LinkedIn or social media, it feels like, wow, I feel like I'm the only person going through this. Rest assured, virtually everyone is going through some flavor of this. And the irony of us going through this collective midlife crisis is that we all feel like we're going through it alone, because we feel like there's nowhere for these conversations to live. You know, we want to be confident, especially later on in our careers. We've always been the person that's had the answers. And so it takes a great deal of kind of courage and vulnerability to talk about what we're actually experiencing. So I want to talk about this, talk a little bit about what is this feeling that we're feeling before I share more ideas on why I think this is happening. And I would sum it up like this. I think most people that I talk to feel like strangers in careers that they've spent their lives building. Now, what does that mean? It means that the things that you've always been good at seem to feel less effective. The things that have always worked for you, that have gotten you where you are today, have stopped working. And you might still be outwardly successful. You might be still hitting your targets, doing everything on the outside that you've always done. And people might look at you thinking, yeah, he's really got his shit together. But their confidence on the inside, you just don't feel it like you used to. And I talk to a lot of people that just don't love work like they used to. And they might still be outwardly successful, but they're just looking down the barrel at the last 5 or 10 years of their career thinking, surely there's got to be something more to this. You know, this idea, this dream that we all got sold early in our lives about go to school, get a job. Maybe you'll work at that job for 30 years, or maybe you'll work at 3 or 4 different places. So you'll do a good job, then you'll get promoted, you'll get hired away, they'll give you an extra 20 grand, and you'll just keep doing this until you hit 60, they give you a gold watch, and you retire on your mountain of cash to play golf and travel for the rest of your life. That does not exist. It doesn't exist for our kids. It existed for our grandparents. It might have existed for our parents. It does not exist for us. And so we're caught in this world where we expected our careers to play out a certain way, and now we're maybe at the tail end of it, and it's like, yeah, I might be able to white knuckle it through this. Maybe I could survive for another 5 years until I feel comfortable, like I've got all the money I need to retire. But I'm here to tell you, I have talked to leaders, dozens of leaders that have tried that. It does not work. And if you're not proactive, and inevitably, if you don't take control of the situation and hope that what has always worked will carry you through, to pivot, to adapt, to do all the things that have always worked for you, it's just not going to work. And you're going to get let go. You're going to get caught flat-footed in a job market with 1 million people that look just like you. And so there's this growing anxiety that, yeah, maybe I could hold on, but surely there's got to be something more. Okay, so that's the feeling and that's the feeling that I think a lot of us have. And I hope that when you listen to this, you're like, yeah, man, Bob is kind of reaching inside my head and articulating exactly the kind of weight that I'm carrying around. Okay, so that's how this midlife crisis feels. How do we get here? Why is this happening, and how is it different from the midlife crises that every generation goes through? Welcome to the corporate reckoning. Now, the corporate reckoning is a combination of three things. It's the impact that COVID had on our jobs, specifically around virtual and remote work. It's the growing uncertainty and anxiety around AI, whether it's going to take your job, it's going to transform it. What do I need to learn? How quickly do I need to learn it? Am I still relevant? And the growing economic uncertainty. I do a lot of work in tech. And so it used to be that certain jobs were really built around relationships, and there was a bit of a long-term perspective on the value that brought to the organization. The changing funding landscape has meant, for example, that everything that everybody in the company does must be tied to revenue. So if you were somebody that had prided themselves and was uniquely gifted at building relationships, all of a sudden your job title might be the same. Your job responsibilities might say that they are unchanged, that they might be the same as they've always been. But now there's a growing expectation that you've got to be out there generating revenue, talking to people, doing activities that you've never been asked to do and never wanted to do. So again, that comes back to this idea that the world is shifting under our feet, and we're just really unsure about what the future brings. So those are the three components of the corporate reckoning. It's how COVID has changed where we work and how we work. It's AI and the changing expectations around what we do and what we can automate and how quickly we need to learn these new things. And it's the growing economic uncertainty. So the interesting thing about the corporate reckoning is that these things did not happen one after another. They happened in conjunction, on top of one another, and they're compounding. So before we had time to adjust to a new world where we're staring into a camera 2, 3, 4, or 5 days a week and losing that connection that made work meaningful, we got hit with AI, which is changing the expectations for our role, meaning that we have to learn a whole bunch of new skills, try to adapt to a set of expectations of leadership that seem to be changing every quarter. And so we feel like we're never caught up. All of the things that used to work, again, have stopped working. And we as humans, we were never meant to deal with this much change this quickly. And it's not a fault of you or of anyone that we're feeling this way. We simply have not had time to adjust. The pendulum is swinging back and forth so quickly, and it will come to rest. We will figure this out. But right now, 5 years after the pandemic, in the middle of AI changing everything about our jobs and expectations of our role that keep changing, we're just confused, we're restless, and we don't feel like we have any control. So the strengths that you have built, the things that have always made you successful were designed for a world that no longer exists. You know, I talk to my kids about this all the time, and Arthur Brooks has a great, I don't know if it's his idea, but I've heard him talk about this idea of serial careers, where you proactively reinvent yourself every 7 or 8 years. And I talk to my kids about this all the time as they're in their early 20s, starting their careers. And forget about the fact that they're probably going to live to be 110 years old. They will have multiple careers. They are not going to do one thing. They're definitely not going to work for one company for 60 years, because that's how long. What are you going to work for 30 years and retire for 50 years? No, you're going to work until you're 80. You might work till you're 90. Of course you're going to have 5, 6, 7 careers. Of course you're going to be reinventing yourself all the time. It's just not something we ever expected to do. And if we were born 10 years earlier, maybe we could have been like our parents and grandparents who just lived out the dream the way we thought it would always work. But here we are. We got 10 years left. The corporate reckoning has changed everything. And we've got to reinvent or renew ourselves. Because if you keep doing what you're doing, if you think you're going to white knuckle your way through this, you will get flat-footed. The only way is to take control of the situation. Stop reacting to AI, to a virtual world that we weren't designed for, to economic contraction that we can't control. If we keep reacting, we're going to be continually carrying around this weight of anxiety that there's something more we're supposed to be doing with our life. Now, the funny thing about the corporate reckoning is that I talk to leaders and organizations every day, and it's really about giving words to how we're all feeling, how they can help their teams find their way through the corporate reckoning, how leaders can help navigate through the final years of their career. And I've come up with this new methodology, and I was feeling really good about it, and I still do. It's called the career reclamation method, and it's pretty awesome. This is not a sales pitch, believe me, because it never fails that as soon as I come up with an answer to a big problem that I've been struggling with, something else comes along and changes everything. And in this case, it was a book. And as I said before, have you ever read a book that feels like it was written specifically for you at just this time in your life? It first happened to me about 5 years ago when I read A Creative Act by Rick Rubin. And if you've listened to this podcast, you've heard me reference it at least 20 times. It was exactly what I needed as I embarked on a journey of kind of rediscovering the creative spark I had lost when I was a kid. But now it's happened again. And the book is called What to Make of a Life by Jim Collins. He's a giant deal. It was written just for me. Now, Jim has a very unique research approach where he pairs subjects, normally companies or leaders, through their evolution to pinpoint the critical differences that led to superior performance. That's how he's tackled these best-selling books in the past. In his latest book, he applies that methodology to people to understand how they built the lives that they did and what we can learn as we try to make the most of our lives. It's not self-help. There's no prescriptive framework to follow on how to live a better life. But he does give us language to better understand how the experiences of our lives have uncovered the things that we're uniquely gifted at and how to organize our lives around those things. And for people like me and the people I talk to struggling to understand how to translate 30 years of experience doing one thing into something completely different that fuels our inner fire, it's exactly what the doctor ordered. And it seems like it gives language and might even provide seeds of the antidote for the corporate reckoning. So I'm going to walk you through some of the basics of the book. If this resonates at all, I'm only hitting on, I would suggest, about 25% of the ideas that he hits on in the book. And so go out and read it. I think you'll really love it. First of all, the book doesn't concern itself with purpose, which is a huge relief. I'm really tired of that question. I have a feeling you are too. I have a feeling if I had a purpose, I would have found it by now. I guess I'm hoping that if I do have one, that if I just stop trying so hard, maybe it'll just fall into my lap. But if we just dismiss that for a moment, because Jim introduces the idea of encodings, which he defines as durable and intrinsic capabilities discovered through the experiences of life. So they're not strengths we have cultivated or skills we have learned. We are born with them, and they are fixed. So think of encodings as stars in the sky, and they can be grouped into constellations, and each of us has a unique blend. And that special combination of constellations defines us. Nobody has the same unique combination of encodings, and we all have more encodings than we will ever discover. Now, here's the first thing I love about this idea, that I think each one of us feels like we do have something that is innately different about us. But every time we go to try to articulate what makes us special and different, it ends up sounding like millions of other people out there. And the main reason we can't convince everyone that we're different is that we don't really believe it. We look around at a sea of other successful people that look just like us. So we start to believe we're good, but maybe nothing special. And we feel restless and lost because we don't know what we're meant to do and where to start. And encodings means that we really do have something to offer the world that no one else can. What is it? Well, we'll talk about that later. But right there, the belief, the understanding that this unique blend of encodings that we all have is different from anybody on Earth. It's different than anybody who's ever walked the Earth and anybody who ever will walk the Earth. That unique encodings defines us and what we can do better than anyone else can. Now, maybe the best part of this idea of encodings is that they are endless. They are revealed to us through the experiences of life. So the encodings, the things that you're naturally gifted at, the ones that you've relied on until now, are only the few that your life has required of you. And if we've been doing one thing for a long time, we may not have had to discover new ones in 10 or 20 years. And so we start thinking that this thing that we've been doing is the only thing we're good at. But what the study shows is that of the 34 subjects in this book, most of them did their best work in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and even 80s because they discovered new encodings later in life. And that should give us hope that our best work may still lie ahead of us, as long as we can get unstuck from the mindset that what we've done until now is all we have to offer. He introduces this idea of in frame and out of frame. So you've got this image of stars in the sky, and that you've got this unique set of encodings, and these encodings are grouped into constellations, these things that we're uniquely gifted at, we're born with, Now, think of a period in your life where, before we go there, imagine looking up at the sky through a telescope, and you can only see a subset of the stars and constellations. So think of that view as your frame. Now, when we are what he calls in frame, we are leveraging a bright set of stars and constellations. Lots of our naturally gifted encodings are specifically in frame, and we're using them every day in pursuit of whatever we're doing at work or at home. We are in frame, that sense of flow. It's the work that we would do for free. It's the work that we can't help but do. If you could do anything in your life, this is what you would do, because you are using the things that you're just so good at. It feels like you were born to do. You are in frame. I wonder if you think back about there are times in your life when you are in frame. There might even be tasks, but think about periods of your life where you absolutely loved work. It just felt effortless. You worked hard at it, but hours flew by. Now, the good news is some people might say, shit, I don't think I've ever been in frame. And that's okay, because we have an endless number of encodings. And just because you have never truly been in frame doesn't mean that you can't. It just means discovering a new set of encodings, those things that you're uniquely gifted at. When we're out of frame, it means like the telescope has shifted and we're not using any or very few of the things we're naturally gifted at. So imagine the telescope and the stars in the sky are looking at a dark part of the sky where there are no constellations or encodings visible. Like you're only seeing the tip of the Big Dipper or one star in Orion's belt. And you could actually be still incredibly successful when you're out of frame. You might be doing things that you're really good at. You've been doing them for a long time, but you're not using those things that you're just naturally gifted at. So you're out of frame. And I think out of frame perfectly describes what I think a lot of us are feeling right now. Even if you had a job and you were doing the same job for a long time, you could still feel out of frame. And since the corporate reckoning, our frame has shifted. It's like the corporate reckoning somebody has kicked our telescope and we're all of a sudden looking at a different part of the sky for the first time. And that telescope seems like it's shifting all the time. So of course we're not feeling restless. We're not feeling centered because we've got these unique set of things that define us. But the frame, our job, the economy, AI, it just keeps changing and looking at a different part of the sky. And maybe we stumble across encodings and maybe we don't. So the corporate reckoning has changed that frame. Now, here's what I love most about this analogy, specifically for people that have done one job for a long time. They've been viewing their life, their work through the telescope for so long that they can't see the rest of the sky. And we start thinking that those stars, those constellations are the only things that exist. We can't see the millions of other things that we're uniquely gifted at because we've been staring at the same part of the sky for so long. We start just becoming completely unaware of all the other things that we could do. And I love this idea that these encodings are unlimited, that they are revealed through the experiences of life. Because if they're unlimited, and because they're revealed to us through the experiences of life, just because we haven't discovered them yet doesn't mean they don't exist. And it means we can still uncover things that we have no idea we were uniquely gifted at. And we can do this at 70, we can do this at 80, and we can sure as hell do it in our 40s or 50s. Now, the last thing I want to talk about before we talk about what to do with all of this is this idea that Jim introduces around cliffs and fog. Now, think back about the moments in your life where something happened that knocked your life off track. These are cliffs. They can be good or bad, but you usually don't see them coming. So the first ones that come to mind for me are my parents' divorce at 20, my dad dying 3 years later, meeting my wife, having kids, getting fired twice, getting sober, and almost losing my son. Those are the big cliffs that come to mind. Every life has cliffs. Some big, some small. How we respond to these cliffs and the decisions we make in response to them largely define the path that our lives take. They're these big forks in the road. And they're often how we discover new encodings because life requires we do something dramatically different. And if you think back about times that you uncovered new skills that you didn't know you had, I bet it wasn't something that you enthusiastically chose as much as something you did because it had to be done and there was no one else to do it. Because you hit a cliff and you did what had to be done. And you stumbled across things that you're uniquely gifted at. And then there's fog. So periods where we feel lost, disoriented, or confused about what to do next. Fog often follows cliffs. And everyone, no matter how accomplished or successful, finds himself lost in a fog funk. It can last months and it can last years. And people in the fog might look like they have it together on the outside, but inside they're riddled with insecurity and fear. And this description of fog is visceral. The idea of being confused and anxious about what to do with the remaining years of our careers perfectly describes what virtually everyone in the corporate reckoning is feeling. It's like we're all lost in the fog together. We feel alone. We have no one to talk to. And everyone else around us seems to have it figured out. And how much easier would it feel if we only knew how many of us were going through the same thing? All right, so those are the basics of Jim Collins' books, giving us language and hope that we can uncover new things that we're uniquely gifted at. Just because we don't know what they are means that our life has never required them of us, and that our best work can lay ahead of us as long as we can divorce ourselves from this idea that the things that we've been doing for the last 20 or 30 years are the only things that we'll ever be good at. So this book isn't prescriptive, but I've got some ideas as we close this out on what you can do with all of this information. First, look back on your life and do some what I call excavation. Create a story bank made up of the significant moments in your life, and you can organize them by cliffs and fog. What encodings did you uncover when you were forced to? Where are those times in your life when you felt in frame, where the work that you were doing seemed effortless, where time flew by? If it wasn't periods of your life, what are tasks that make you feel that way? When were you in the fog? You're probably in the fog right now. How did you find your way out of it? And when you think of when you're in frame and out of frame, what were you doing? Who were you with? Where were you? And start listing out your encodings. It requires a level of self-awareness that you might not have spent much time thinking about. And then you want to think about how you can build operating modes around those encodings. So I'll give you an example in a minute. But that's the first step, is create a story bank. Think back about your life with this new perspective at encodings and constellations and lives and cliffs and fog and all that stuff. How does it change the perspective on your life? And how does it uncover those encodings that you're uniquely gifted at, to uncover the things that you can do better than anyone else can? And what you're going to end up is, as I talked before, kind of Lego blocks. Each one of these parts of your story strewn across the floor. And now you can assemble them in different ways. Put together a story that pulls together those encodings, that articulates what's unique for you. And think about, what are the jobs, opportunities, businesses that require, that value that unique set of encodings? And then go out and talk to people. Share your story. Talk to people about it. You can write about it on social media if you want. Try to get out and talk to other faces in 3 dimensions and just test it out. And as you're going through life from this point forward, think about your encodings. And are you in the fog? And what cliffs have you had to navigate, and the things you've had to learn? I think it provides a really unique perspective on things. So here are some of the encodings that I've uncovered as I've gone through this. I work best in the early morning. A combination of exercise, being outside, and manual labor gives me my best ideas. I'm most energized in one-on-one conversations in small groups. I like crafting stories and sharing them with larger groups. I love understanding the root causes of issues people are having and exploring creative solutions. Despite believing my whole life I was not creative, I have 55 years of pent-up creativity inside me, and I'm most fulfilled when I get it out and share it. I'm told I make people feel heard and understood, and I love exercising my curiosity to understand how people see the world differently than I do. That is a small group of the encodings that I've uncovered, and when I think back about when I'm in frame, I am using a bunch of those encodings. And when I've done things where I'm not fulfilled and I'm not happy, it's because I'm not leveraging any of those things, and I've been asked to do things that just aren't in alignment with those things. So here is a snippet of the story, how I've put those Lego blocks together. I've played small my whole life, working hard to blend in instead of standing out. I was Art Garfunkel, content with second place. Then within 2 years, that changed. I got sober after a particularly embarrassing Easter weekend, and my son had emergency brain surgery. I don't know if my renewal happens with just one of those events, but I know it doesn't happen as quickly without that combination. Sobriety brought clarity on what I'm uniquely gifted at, and almost losing my son instilled a sense of urgency to do something more with the time I have left. I believe curiosity can save us from the mediocre lives we've been settling for, and I'm on a mission to help 1 million people rediscover their curiosity and live the bigger lives they deserve. That's it. Having that clarity, at least, I haven't found my way through the corporate reckoning. I am still in the fog. But as I go out there and I talk to people about this, and I share that story, and you'll be absolutely amazed at how many other people are like, oh my God, you are reaching inside my brain and talking about something that I have been carrying around with me without words to describe it, without a place for these conversations to live. And like I said, this is not fully formed. I know this is cringeworthy. I know I'm going to listen to this an hour from now and be like, oh my God, what were you rambling on about? It's not perfect. It's very little editing. I want to thank my producer, Amy, in advance for whatever work she had to do to try to make this sound somewhat coherent. I've absolutely loved trying to think through this together with you. I hope you stuck it through to the end. If you're interested in more ramblings about this, join my Substack at substack.bobmathers.com. It's 100% free. You can always email me at bob@bobmathers.ca. Message me on Spotify or wherever you listen. Find me on LinkedIn. This has been awesome, and good luck. The Growth Mixtape podcast with Bob Mathers is produced by Bespoke Projects. Music by Jean-Michel Walter Cronkite. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to follow and rate us. When you do this, it helps to raise our podcast profile so that more people can find us. If you want to connect, you can find me on LinkedIn using the link in the show notes.